The Architecture of Unstoppable Minds. Introduction. Every transformation that has ever mattered begins with a single shift in perspective. Not necessarily thinking bigger or faster, but thinking in an entirely different direction. The moment your internal operating system upgrades, everything you create starts shifting alongside it. Society whispers that excellence belongs only to the fortunate few, but examine history closely and you'll discover something far simpler. Extraordinary achievement belongs to those who learn to construct an unbreakable mental infrastructure. This program is your roadmap toward that construction. Not a quick motivational spike that evaporates by Thursday, but a methodical, enduring blueprint for developing a mind so crystalline, so powerful, so finely tuned that doubt becomes irrelevant. A mind capable of this doesn't accumulate through luck. It doesn't emerge from talent alone. It builds through one deliberate choice at a time, layered upon another, until people stop asking if you can and simply accept that you will. You're here because something inside you recognizes untapped territory. Let's begin mapping it. Chapter 1. Construct your psychological foundation. Before you attempt to build any external reality, you must understand this non-negotiable truth. Everything collapses without a solid foundation beneath it. Most people attempt to construct achievement like contractors building on sand. They implement discipline techniques, they push harder, they force motivation, all while their core beliefs remain fractured. Then they're shocked when pressure arrives and everything crumbles. You're pursuing something different. A mind capable of withstanding genuine weight. That begins with one element, the narrative you've internalized about yourself. Your psychological foundation isn't constructed from your genetics, your circumstances, or your starting point. It's constructed entirely from the story you've accepted as truth. The inner monologue you repeat unconsciously. The identity you've inherited rather than chosen. If that story reads like limitation, your identity will mirror it. Here's the revolutionary part. You don't have to keep that story. The narrative you carry, this is simply who I am, I've always been this way, people like me don't achieve that. These are manuscripts you were handed, not ones you wrote, and the author has no authority anymore. Your foundation begins the moment you consciously decide to rewrite the script. Think of your mind like architectural plans. If the blueprints contain structural flaws, no amount of beautiful exterior design matters. The building will eventually surrender to pressure. Similarly, forcing yourself through willpower while maintaining old self-beliefs creates permanent resistance. You're trying to operate as someone different while your identity whispers the old truth. That contradiction creates internal friction, inconsistency, failure. The stronger approach? Select your identity first. Become it through action. Watch confidence follow naturally. Yes, this feels uncomfortable initially. The voice of your former self will protest, questioning whether you deserve this evolution. That resistance isn't your enemy. It's evidence you're entering unmapped territory. The old self-image fights to preserve familiar ground. When that voice appears, don't resist it. Recognize it. Acknowledge it. Then proceed anyway. Your foundation rebuilds every time you choose growth over the comfort of inaction. Every promise you honor to yourself, every step forward despite the discomfort. Small acts of integrity compound into something formidable, self-trust, and self-trust becomes the bedrock everything else stands upon. Make this decision today. Decide precisely who you intend to become. Define the standards you'll live by. Select the narrative you accept. Design the identity that aligns with your genuine ambitions. Because once that foundation solidifies, once your internal world becomes stable, your external world reorganizes itself to match. This is where authentic transformation originates. Chapter 2. Train your mental engine systematically. If you genuinely want an extraordinary mind, you must treat it exactly how elite performers treat their instruments, with intention, rigor, and deliberate methodology. Not inconsistently, not when circumstances feel optimal, daily, relentlessly.
Here's what most people overlook. Your mind responds to training faster than your body does. It sharpens under challenge. It expands under stress. It strengthens through consistent pressure. But this only happens when you're training deliberately, not haphazardly. Consider a concert pianist preparing for a major performance. They don't show up to rehearsal only on days they're inspired. They don't abandon their practice routine because they're fatigued. They don't construct their schedule based on emotion. They follow a systematic regimen: warm-up, technique refinement, full performance simulation, recovery, repetition. Your mind requires identical methodology. You need a framework, not rigid but consistent, not exhausting but intentional. When you systematically train your mind daily, something shifts. You develop mental endurance. Just as muscles fatigue after physical exertion, your mind fatigues during intense focus, complex problem solving, emotional processing, or high-stakes situations. Here's the distinction. While others allow their mind to deteriorate under pressure, you train yours to remain composed, clear, and commanding regardless of circumstance. That's what separates the average from the exceptional. How do you build this systematically? Start with manageable daily challenges, activities that stretch your thinking, tasks demanding unusual focus, situations requiring slight discomfort, nothing dramatic, just consistent. Spend 15 minutes with substantive literature each morning. Sit in genuine silence for 10 minutes, not meditating, just existing. Each day, execute one task that makes you slightly uncomfortable, something forcing your brain to adapt. These micro-practices build mental resilience layer upon layer. Then introduce deliberate difficulty, not stress arbitrarily applied, but challenges designed for growth. You don't grow mentally by avoiding obstacles. You grow by navigating them. You develop by shouldering responsibility. You strengthen by persisting through resistance. Each difficulty becomes a training session. Each setback becomes a mental workout. Every demanding moment becomes an opportunity to fortify your most valuable tool, your consciousness. Athletes don't just train hard, they train intelligently. They rest, they recover, they consume proper fuel. Your mind demands the same commitment. Rest isn't laziness, silence isn't emptiness, reflection isn't avoidance. These components are essential parts of the training protocol. An exhausted mind cannot perform optimally, and forcing intensity without recovery creates burnout, not brilliance.
Permit your mind to recharge. Allow it to process. This rejuvenation enables it to return stronger. The final element, repetition. You don't become mentally disciplined through single events. You become disciplined through consistent repetition until the behavior becomes your default operating mode. Automatic habits don't require willpower, they just happen. And when optimal behaviors become automatic, your life reorganizes naturally. There's something profound here. Genuine confidence emerges from training, never from hope or talent alone. Confidence materializes through evidence, through demonstrating to yourself repeatedly what you can handle. Every time you complete something demanding, your internal voice whispers, "See what you're capable of?" That whisper intensifies with each repetition until it becomes the voice running your life. Train your mind with purpose. Train it consistently. Train it like you're preparing for the most critical performance of your existence. Because you are. Your life is the performance, your discipline, your choices, your focus, your resilience. These are your measurements of achievement. When you start treating your mind like an athlete treats their body, a transformation occurs. Challenges stop looking like threats. They become opportunities. Discomfort becomes fuel. You stop waiting for strength. You build it methodically. This is how you transcend the ordinary. This is how you develop a mind so extensively trained, so finely honed, so precisely calibrated that doubt literally has nowhere to land. And when you sustain this long enough, what once appeared impossible becomes your new starting point. Chapter 3. Eliminate the mental clutter that chains you.
One ability separates a scattered mind from an exceptional one: the capacity to direct your attention deliberately rather than letting it scatter in infinite directions. You cannot construct anything meaningful if your consciousness jumps constantly. You cannot build momentum when your focus fragments across competing demands. Focus is the gateway to clarity, effectiveness, and genuine peace. But focus doesn't appear spontaneously. You must create it by systematically removing the mental interference that silently consumes your attention, energy, and possibility. Ask yourself honestly, how often does your mind feel genuinely overloaded, not physically exhausted, but mentally overwhelmed, spinning with competing thoughts, excessive inputs, unresolved concerns, dangling responsibilities? That's mental interference, and it's your primary adversary. Interference exhausts you. It disperses your energy. It creates the illusion of productivity while producing zero forward movement. You feel occupied, but stationary. You're reacting, not directing. But you're here because you're prepared to operate differently. Where does your attention leak away? The primary culprit: constant stimulation, notifications arriving ceaselessly, endless scrolling, perpetual task switching, your phone commanding attention every few minutes. This routine is training your mind toward distraction. You're conditioning your brain to crave interruption. You're teaching it that sustained focus isn't required. Over time, this decimates your concentration capacity. To reclaim focus, you must reverse this conditioning. You must teach your mind to stay, to go deeper, to resist the pull outward. That begins with intentional silence, not hours of it, just sustained periods where nothing stimulates you. No devices, no conversation, no external noise, simply breathing, simply existing. Initially, silence feels destabilizing because your mind is accustomed to chaos, but persist. That discomfort is actually your consciousness detoxifying. You're shedding the accumulated interference. Silence isn't absence, it's the vacuum that pulls clarity inward. Next, simplify your mental environment. Most people carry excessive open loops, unfinished projects, unresolved decisions, disorganized thoughts. Every unresolved loop consumes mental space. Accumulate enough of them, and focus becomes nearly impossible. Complete a mental reset. Externalize everything crowding your consciousness. Write it down. Get it out of your head and onto paper. You're not solving everything immediately. You're simply removing the weight. Another powerful practice: execute one thing at a time. Not two, not three, one. Multitasking is an illusion. Your brain doesn't manage multiple complex tasks simultaneously. It switches rapidly between them, burning energy, reducing focus, and degrading thinking quality. When you select one task and offer it your complete presence, something remarkable happens. Your mind becomes sharper. You enter a flow state. You remain present. You actually complete what you start. This single shift transforms everything. Your internal dialogue matters intensely. Your inner voice either generates clarity or creates interference. If your inner voice continuously bounces between fears, catastrophizing, social comparison, and regret, how can you expect to concentrate? You can't. Begin retraining your internal voice. When thoughts start spinning, pause, breathe. Replace the noise with simple direction. Concentrate on what matters right now. Repeat this consistently. Your mind responds. Your mind obeys. Here's the deeper reality. Focus isn't purely about attention. It's fundamentally about energy. Your energy flows where your attention directs. Where your energy flows, your life develops. Scattered attention equals scattered energy. Disciplined attention equals directed force. This is why focused people advance faster, create more, and remain calmer. Their consciousness aligns, their energy concentrates, nothing dissipates. You need boundaries, genuine boundaries protecting your mental space. Deactivate unnecessary notifications, reduce exposure to negativity, minimize time with people who drain your vitality. Guard your mind like you would guard something irreplaceable, because your mind is irreplaceable. It's the generator powering everything you accomplish. Here's something people consistently miss. Focus strengthens through practice. The more you cultivate it, the more powerful it becomes. What feels difficult today becomes natural tomorrow. What seems impossible next week becomes your standard baseline. You're literally rewiring how your brain functions. You're mastering your attention. You're reducing the noise. You're amplifying the clarity. And when clarity increases, everything simplifies. Your decisions, your objectives, your emotional stability, your entire existence. An exceptional mind isn't louder, it's quieter. It isn't crowded with chaos, it's organized. It isn't pulled in multiple directions, it's intentional. You don't need countless thoughts, you need the right ones. You don't need more noise, you need more focus. The more thoroughly you eliminate interference, the more clearly your true potential emerges. The more systematically you develop focus, the more formidable your mind becomes.
Eventually, you'll recognize something profound. You didn't just eliminate interference. You reclaimed your consciousness. You reasserted control. Now you determine where your attention flows, where your energy directs, and how your future materializes. Chapter 4. Reconstruct your belief system for expansion. Every transformation originates in consciousness long before it manifests in behavior, habits, or visible results. That's what most people misunderstand completely. They attempt to reconstruct their reality through harder work, greater effort, extended grinding, yet they never examine the foundational thoughts that originally created their current situation. You cannot transcend your limitations with outdated thinking. You cannot reach higher levels while your beliefs remain stuck in previous patterns. Your thoughts are your command center. They govern how you experience things, how you respond, and ultimately what you permit or reject in your life. Real transformation, lasting, profound transformation, requires upgrading your fundamental thinking. Your thoughts function as the lens through which you interpret reality. If that lens is clouded, everything appears distorted. Possibilities look risky, ambitions appear impossible, failure seems permanent. But when you clean the lens, when you reconstruct your thoughts, everything becomes clearer. You begin seeing possibilities where you previously saw obstacles. You recognize capabilities where you previously identified deficiencies. You envision progress where you previously expected struggle. That shift isn't magical, it's the natural consequence of changing your internal operating system. Imagine updating a computer's operating system. When outdated software attempts to run modern applications, it freezes, crashes, and slows dramatically. It simply cannot keep up. Identical dynamics apply to you. You're attempting to reach new heights while operating outdated thinking, and this creates mental friction. It generates self-sabotage. It establishes a chasm between your genuine ambitions and what you believe you deserve. That gap stops progress absolutely every time. Reconstructing your thoughts closes that gap. It reauthors the narrative. It synchronizes your inner world with the external reality you're attempting to construct. How do you reconstruct your thoughts? Begin with awareness. Awareness precedes transformation. Most people operate on mental autopilot. Thoughts materialize and they simply accept them unconsciously. But you're developing an exceptional mind. That requires observing the thoughts traversing your consciousness daily. Thoughts like, I'm incapable of this. This consistently happens to me. I'm not prepared. What if I fail spectacularly? These seem inconsequential, but they're actively designing your boundaries. They're establishing your limitations. They're writing your identity. They demand challenge. The instant you capture an outdated limiting thought, interrupt it, question it. Ask yourself, is this thought moving me forward or restraining me? If it's restraining you, don't permit it to persist.
Replace it, not with hollow positivity, but with empowering, truthful thinking. Rather than "I cannot accomplish this," try "I'm capable of learning this." Rather than "I perpetually sabotage myself," try "I'm continuously improving." Rather than "I'm not prepared," try "I will expand into this." These aren't fantasies, they're conscious directions you're offering your mind. They're instructions for moving toward strength. Another essential element: reconstruct your interpretation of difficulty. When demanding circumstances materialize, your interpretation determines your outcome. Most people respond with "Why is this happening to me?" or "This is terrible," or "This shouldn't be occurring." But people with reconstructed thinking ask, "What is this teaching me?" or "How is this developing me?" or "What can I extract from this experience?" Identical situation, different interpretation, completely divergent paths. For reconstructed minds, difficulties become education. Setbacks become foundation. Obstacles become lessons. That's not because their reality is simpler, it's because their thinking is more powerful. You additionally reconstruct your thoughts by upgrading your mental inputs. Your consciousness mirrors what you consume. If you absorb negativity, drama, and low-value information, your thinking will follow that pattern. Spend significant time with limited thinkers, and your consciousness will operate from fear. To transform your external world, you must transform what enters your internal world. Engage with literature that elevates you. Listen to perspectives that challenge your assumptions. Immerse yourself in ideas that expand you. Make intentional mental nourishment a priority. What you feed your mind becomes the filter through which you think. This element requires explicit understanding. Your thinking must align with your intended future, not your completed past. You cannot maintain your existing thoughts while expecting to become your future self. Those previous thoughts constructed your previous identity. They're useful for that version of you, but not for who you're becoming. The familiar feels comfortable, but comfortable doesn't mean beneficial. Comfortable doesn't mean accurate. Comfortable simply means established. Your thoughts established your previous identity through repetition. Now it's time to repeat thoughts that serve your future. As you reconstruct your thinking, you'll notice something remarkable. Your behavior transforms naturally. You procrastinate less because your thoughts no longer generate fear and uncertainty. You initiate more action because your thinking confirms your competence. You remain steadier under pressure because your internal voice reminds you of your evolution. Your external presentation shifts, your communication patterns shift, your whole presence transforms because your internal transformation precedes it. Constructing an exceptional mind isn't about achieving flawless thoughts. It's about choosing deliberate, intentional thinking. It's about selecting thoughts that serve your objectives rather than allowing habitual patterns to run automatically. The more consistently you practice this reconstruction, the more automatic it becomes. Gradually, steadily, intentionally, your consciousness evolves. And as your consciousness evolves, your entire existence follows. Chapter 5. Develop emotional mastery and inner strength. If there's a single territory where people surrender their greatest power, it's not in intelligence or willpower, it's in their emotional world. Most people don't recognize how much of their potential evaporates because their emotions are commanding them rather than operating under their direction. They react impulsively. They get overwhelmed effortlessly. They personalize situations excessively. They maintain frustration far longer than necessary.
Day after day, these emotional patterns weaken the mind. But you're here to construct an exceptional mind, and that explicitly requires genuine emotional mastery, not pretended strength, not suppressed feelings, but authentic authority over your emotional world so it becomes your greatest asset instead of your greatest vulnerability. Emotional mastery starts with awareness. You cannot manage what you don't notice. Most people encounter a feeling and respond instantaneously. Anger transforms into conflict. Fear transforms into paralysis. Insecurity transforms into self-destruction. But emotionally powerful individuals operate differently. They pause, they observe, they create a small space between the feeling and the reaction. That space is everything. That space contains your authority. When you grant yourself even a brief moment to identify what you're experiencing, you gain the capacity to choose your response rather than defaulting to your habitual pattern. And choosing your response is the essential difference. Emotional weakness reacts impulsively. Emotional strength acts intentionally. Emotional weakness permits external events to determine your internal state. Emotional strength permits you to determine your internal state. This doesn't mean eliminating emotions. It doesn't mean disconnecting. It means experiencing your feelings without being controlled by them, sensing emotions while maintaining stability, encountering disappointment, pressure, or suffering without losing your equilibrium. Emotional mastery additionally demands understanding your individual triggers. Everyone possesses them: words, scenarios, memories, insecurities that instantly pull you into emotional turbulence. But a trigger isn't inherently destructive. A trigger is information. It illuminates where your emotional development requires attention. Rather than avoiding triggers or denying their existence, examine them. Ask yourself, why does this affect me so profoundly? What underlying belief connects to this feeling? What narrative am I constructing? When you illuminate your triggers, they lose their dominance. They stop functioning automatically. They stop controlling you. You discover how to respond with intention instead of reacting emotionally. Emotional mastery also requires emotional responsibility. This means claiming ownership of your emotional state instead of attributing your feelings to others. Weaker thinking says, "You made me furious." Stronger thinking says, "I encountered anger and I selected my response." Weaker thinking says, "They stressed me out." Stronger thinking says, "I experienced stress and I managed it." Weaker thinking waits for the world to behave ideally so feelings can improve. Stronger thinking constructs stability independent of circumstances. Emotional responsibility doesn't mean others cannot affect you. It means they don't control you. That distinction transforms everything. It produces liberation. It produces strength. It produces the emotional autonomy you require to progress. Consider the practice of tolerating discomfort. Most emotional weakness originates from avoiding uncomfortable feelings: fear, sadness, frustration, uncertainty. But when you avoid a feeling, you reinforce it. When you resist an emotion, it strengthens. It haunts you. It influences your subsequent decisions. Conversely, when you confront discomfort, when you breathe through it, when you permit yourself to experience it without escaping, you grow stronger. You train your consciousness to manage emotional weight exactly like you train muscles to manage physical weight. You lift it, you endure it, you emerge stronger. Emotional mastery additionally develops through perspective. Emotion typically emerges from interpretation, not reality itself. Two individuals encountering identical situations frequently experience completely different feelings because their interpretations differ completely. One perceives rejection, the other perceives redirection. One perceives failure, the other perceives feedback. One perceives loss, the other perceives education. When you control the story you assign to a situation, you control the emotional experience that results. And this capacity, selecting a generative perspective, can fundamentally reorganize your existence. Let's be direct. Emotional mastery doesn't eliminate difficult moments. It doesn't mean you never struggle or feel overwhelmed. Emotional mastery means you don't remain broken. You don't remain paralyzed. You don't permit temporary feelings to generate permanent decisions. You acknowledge the emotion, you move through it, you rise above it. An exceptional mind constructs itself not through denying emotions, but through commanding them, through stabilizing yourself when circumstances feel chaotic, through responding with clarity when turbulence attempts to pull you down, through remaining grounded and intentional even when your feelings intensify. You possess the capacity for emotional mastery. You're capable of controlling your responses. You're capable of feeling deeply without being overwhelmed.
And every instance you exercise emotional awareness, emotional ownership, emotional patience, and emotional bravery, you strengthen the essence of you that remains unshakable. That is genuine emotional mastery. Chapter 6. Cultivate independent thought and intellectual courage. One of the most transformative shifts you can accomplish is learning to think autonomously. Not privately thinking, not quietly thinking, thinking independently, courageously, without requiring external validation to legitimize your thoughts. Most people never accomplish this. They follow the majority. They recycle opinions without questioning them. They absorb beliefs without examining them. They never question anything independently. They move with consensus because agreement feels safer. But safety is not strength. Safety is not evolution. Safety is not autonomy. If you genuinely want an exceptional mind, you must develop willingness to stand intellectually solitary far before your outcomes validate your position. Independent thinking demands genuine courage. The instant you think differently, you risk being misunderstood. You risk judgment. You risk exile from consensus. And most people retreat precisely there. They silence themselves. They minimize themselves. They sacrifice authenticity for acceptance. Comprehend this explicitly. Every extraordinary life stands upon unconventional decisions, original thinking, and the willingness to trust your own consciousness before the world confirms you're correct. Where does independent thinking originate? With questioning your assumptions. Everything you were raised believing isn't necessarily accurate. Every opinion you absorbed isn't necessarily valid. Every fact you carry isn't necessarily grounded in reality.
Your consciousness contains beliefs transmitted to you by your surroundings, your culture, your family, your experiences. But you inherited these beliefs without authorization. Now you determine what persists and what transforms. You decide what aligns with your authentic becoming. That's the initial step, intentional thinking instead of inherited thinking. Independent thinking additionally requires trusting your internal voice. You possess instincts deliberately. You possess internal knowing deliberately. You possess the capacity to sense direction, recognize potential, and sense danger before circumstances validate it. But if you're constantly drowning in noise, other people's viewpoints, online arguments, social pressure, you'll never hear your authentic voice clearly. And if you never hear your genuine voice, you'll eventually recognize you've lived someone else's existence. Independent thinkers don't dismiss advice, but they don't become dependent on it. They gather information, but they form their own conclusions. They listen, but they ultimately decide for themselves. Let's be absolutely clear. Independent thinking doesn't mean isolation. It doesn't mean rejecting every external perspective. It means deliberately evaluating ideas instead of unconsciously absorbing them. It means activating your judgment rather than outsourcing it. Independent thinkers remain open to ideas while staying self-directed. They learn from everyone while following no one blindly. To cultivate this capacity, you must practice asking increasingly powerful questions. Exceptional thinkers don't passively accept what they experience. They excavate deeper. They ask why? What else? Is this genuinely accurate? Does this serve me? What evidence supports this? What are the extended consequences? Questions unlock the mind. Questions expose truth. Questions distinguish the thinker from the automaton. The world overflows with people prepared to be instructed what to think. An exceptional mind refuses this. It selects curiosity over obedience. It selects substance over convenience. Independent thinking additionally demands emotional resilience. Here's why. Thinking distinctly frequently provokes opposition from others. People may interrogate you. Some may argue. Some may ridicule or attack. Not because you're incorrect, but because your independence illuminates their dependency.
Most people prefer conformity because it eliminates accountability. When you diverge from that, you confront them with their own freedom, and many fear it. Occasionally, they respond with discomfort or pushback. That's where genuine bravery becomes necessary. You must continue thinking independently even when others don't comprehend you. Here's the profound reality. Independent thinking systematically produces superior decisions. When you decide grounded in someone else's convictions, you experience the consequences while they continue unaffected. But when a decision originates from your authentic clarity, regardless of outcome, you expand from it, you learn, you evolve. Over time, your capacity to generate strong decisions becomes among your greatest competitive advantages. Confidence materializes from observing your own judgment succeed in practical reality. One powerful practice: spend time alone with your thinking. No external stimulation, no competing voices, just you and your consciousness. When you think without influence, you start understanding what you genuinely believe, what authentically matters to you, what direction genuinely feels right. Solitude isn't loneliness. Solitude is mental liberation. It's where your deepest insights surface. It's where genuine clarity resides. Independent thinking additionally means becoming comfortable being ahead of the crowd. Occasionally, you'll perceive things others haven't yet noticed. You'll believe in yourself before others believe in you. You'll recognize potential that others overlook. That's the nature of independent thought. It moves ahead of the collective. Most people cannot fathom what they haven't previously witnessed, but your responsibility isn't convincing them. Your responsibility is trusting your consciousness sufficiently to walk the path before validation arrives. That's genuine bravery. That's authentic leadership. That's how extraordinary lives develop. You possess the capacity for independent thinking. You maintain the courage to question, to choose, to decide, to trust your reasoning. The more thoroughly you embrace this, the more formidable your consciousness becomes. You discontinue following. You commence leading. Yourself initially, your life second, and eventually others as well. Independent thinking isn't merely a capacity, it's a threshold. Once you cross it, your entire universe begins expanding. Chapter 7. Transform discipline into your greatest advantage. If there's a solitary characteristic that will reorganize everything, your patterns, your self-image, your sense of yourself, your outcomes, it's discipline. Discipline is the passageway connecting who you currently are with who you recognize you're capable of becoming. And despite what numerous people imagine, discipline isn't about punishment. It's not about suffering. It's not about forcing yourself into anguish. Discipline is simply this: executing what requires completion even when you lack inspiration. That's genuinely it. And because most people only perform when motivation shows up, discipline becomes extraordinarily rare, a genuinely distinctive advantage. But comprehend this clearly. Discipline isn't something you possess. Discipline is something you construct. It develops through repetition. It strengthens through choices. It grows through consistency. The more extensively you cultivate it, the simpler it becomes. The more powerfully you develop it, the more you discover discipline isn't constraining, it's liberating. It frees you from the disorder of inconsistency. It emancipates you from the imprisonment of excuses. It liberates you from the boundaries of your previous self. The substantial misunderstanding: people imagine disciplined individuals simply have more willpower. They don't. They've engineered more effective systems. They've designed their circumstances, their behaviors, and their schedules to support the person they intend to be. They transform the right choice into the easiest choice. They don't depend on feeling ready. They depend on architecture. That's the secret. Structure generates momentum. Momentum produces discipline. Discipline creates outcomes. Examine this directly. Discipline is fundamentally a progression of modest commitments you establish to yourself repeatedly. Awakening at the moment you predetermined, executing the task you committed to, following the plan you recognized as important. These seem minor, but each substantially builds identity. Each substantially develops self-trust.
Every instance you keep a commitment to yourself, your consciousness becomes stronger. Every instance you violate one, you weaken that internal trust. And an exceptional mind constructs itself on unshakable self-trust. Discipline establishes that trust. Another essential discipline element, eliminating the requirement for flawlessness. Perfectionism dismantles discipline because the instant you stumble, you feel you've collapsed. And when you feel collapsed, you abandon the effort. Discipline isn't flawlessness. Discipline is consistency. It's selecting to restart each instance you slip. Without judgment, without regret, without drama, simply resuming your path. The capacity to initiate again quickly transcends the capacity to remain flawless, significantly. You additionally must understand discipline's emotional dimension. Most opposition you encounter isn't physiological, it's mental. Your consciousness says, I lack enthusiasm. Your consciousness says, postpone this. Your consciousness says, you're fatigued. And because the mind prioritizes ease, we learn to negotiate with ourselves. But negotiation destroys discipline. Here's an influential principle. When you determine something, execute it without reopening the discussion. Eliminate the dialogue. Eliminate the back and forth. When you commit to something, it becomes non-negotiable. That singular shift transforms your consistency. Another method to simplify discipline, reduce the starting requirement. People collapse because they start too ambitiously. They transform from zero to everything overnight. That's not how discipline operates. Discipline develops from modest, achievable actions repeated daily. Want to consume more literature? Start with 10 minutes. Want to move your body? Start with 15 minutes. Want to develop a creative practice? Start with one small element. Modest starting points eliminate resistance, and once the practice becomes established, you naturally increase the scope. Strategize small to evolve substantially. Now for something people frequently bypass. Discipline grants identity authority. When you perform with discipline, you transform how you perceive yourself. You commence recognizing, I'm someone who follows through. That identity transformation carries more value than any external honor, because the instant you genuinely recognize yourself as disciplined, your subsequent selections naturally synchronize with that self-image. You don't require external pressure anymore. You simply perform like the person you've become. And here's the exceptional element. Discipline generates autonomy. When you operate with discipline, you don't exist in chaos. You don't exist perpetually behind schedule. You don't exist continuously overwhelmed. You gain power over your temporal reality, your vitality, your responsibilities. And with power comes assurance. With assurance comes momentum. With momentum comes reorganization. Comprehend this. Discipline develops gradually, quietly, nearly imperceptibly. You won't feel extraordinary after one disciplined action, but you absolutely will after 2 weeks. You'll feel unstoppable after 30 days. You'll be unrecognizable after a year. Discipline multiplies. Every modest action compounds into something remarkable. You possess the capacity to construct relentless discipline. It's irrelevant where you're initiating. It's irrelevant what your previous patterns were. What determines everything is the selection you make currently. The selection to claim authority over your consciousness and your actions. Every day, ask yourself, what promise will I maintain today? Then maintain it, one commitment at a time, one action at a time. You'll build discipline into your essential nature. And when discipline becomes who you are, uncertainty disappears, excuses disappear, restrictions disappear. Because authentic discipline is the essence of an exceptional mind. Chapter 8. Nourish your mind with deliberate precision. Your consciousness is perpetually absorbing something, concepts,
conversations, perspectives, entertainment, content. Your consciousness receives nourishment continuously, and precisely as your physiology mirrors what you consume physically, your consciousness mirrors what you consume mentally. Feed it trash, it becomes weaker, slower, more bewildered. Feed it superior nourishment, wisdom that elevates your consciousness, knowledge sharpening your perception, insight expanding your worldview. Your consciousness becomes remarkable. Not instantaneously, but steadily, undeniably remarkable. This entire section concerns consciously controlling that procedure. Recognize this explicitly. Your consciousness is your most valuable resource, not your career, not your competencies, not your possibilities. Your consciousness is the source of everything you construct, everything you overcome, everything you become. Yet most individuals protect their devices more carefully than they protect their consciousness. They permit anything and everything to penetrate their mental boundaries. Gossip, negativity, fear-saturated reporting, pointless conflict, shallow distraction. Then they're perplexed why they feel mentally exhausted, mentally scattered, mentally depleted. Your consciousness cannot flourish on degraded input. It requires quality. It requires substance. It requires genuine nourishment. And here's the authentic truth. Superior knowledge doesn't broadcast. It doesn't pursue you relentlessly. It doesn't demand your focus. It's quiet. It's deliberate. It demands effort to seek. That's precisely why most people never encounter it. They accept whatever's easiest to consume. But you're building an exceptional mind, and an exceptional consciousness demands a distinct category of input. Not noise, not distraction, not mental junk food. It requires knowledge that challenges you and transforms you. One of the most effective ways to upgrade your mental nourishment, engage with substantive literature. Books contain the consolidated insights of lifetimes. They introduce you to perspectives you may never experience in your everyday environments. They refine your thinking. They enrich your language. They expand your internal universe. Reading isn't merely information absorption. Reading is mental conditioning. Even 20 minutes daily can reorganize how you process reality. And when you deliberately choose premium literature, psychology, philosophy, discipline, personal development, leadership, consciousness, you're nourishing your mind with knowledge reinforcing your identity. Another incredibly potent input, purposeful dialogue. The people you engage with regularly shape your thinking more powerfully than you recognize. Surrounding yourself with constrained thinkers, you'll think constrainedly. Surrounding yourself with negative individuals, your consciousness absorbs negativity. Surrounding yourself with gossips, complaints, or surrendering easily, their patterns gradually infiltrate yours.
But when you engage with people who challenge your thinking, who contemplate profoundly, who cultivate growth, who perceive possibilities, your consciousness transforms, your expectations increase, your perception heightens. It's not about discovering flawless individuals. It's about participating in dialogues that energize your mind rather than depleting it. Even one conversation with someone operating from a different framework can unlock doors in your consciousness you didn't recognize existed. Another essential element of nourishing your consciousness: deliberately filter your digital consumption. In contemporary reality, the internet either elevates you or demolishes your attention. Without intentional control, it will control you absolutely. You must become deliberate regarding what you consume, what you engage with, what you absorb digitally. Ask yourself continuously, is this generating growth or maintaining distraction? Is this constructing my capacity or diminishing it? Is this fortifying my consciousness or weakening it? Simply asking these questions eliminates roughly half your daily mental clutter. Remember, premium knowledge isn't perpetually instantly pleasurable. Real growth rarely is. Occasionally, you'll need to sit with an idea until comprehension emerges. Occasionally, you'll need to reread something. Occasionally, you'll need to decelerate and contemplate profoundly.
That's precisely how authentic learning materializes, not in haste, not in noise, but in deliberate, thoughtful contemplation. Another significant element, nourishment transcends mere information. It encompasses inspiration. Inspiration awakens parts of your consciousness that reasoning cannot reach. It reconnects you with your authentic purpose. It activates creativity. It reminds you why you're pursuing transformation in the first place. Whether it's a profound presentation, beautifully composed content, a powerful quotation, or a narrative of human resilience, premium inspiration fortifies your consciousness and maintains your energy for the extended journey. But recognize this explicitly. None of this matters if you don't create psychological openness for fresh knowledge. You cannot fill a container that's already overflowing. You must eliminate the mental garbage first. Minimize the interference, decrease the stimulation, stop the valueless input. When you create room, premium knowledge can penetrate and establish itself. And here's something remarkable. The more thoroughly you nourish your consciousness with premium input, the less your consciousness tolerates inferior input. The more substantially you learn, the more powerfully you crave learning. The more thoroughly you transform, the more transformation becomes your natural condition. Over time, your mental preferences shift. Superficial information no longer satisfies you. You develop genuine hunger for substance, genuine understanding, authentic insight. That transformation independently signals an ascending consciousness. Consider what your existence would resemble if your consciousness was systematically nourished with ideas generating strength, perception, serenity, strategy, and consciousness. Imagine how substantially more assuredly you'd navigate decisions. Imagine how substantially more precisely you'd operate intellectually. Imagine how substantially more formidable your self-image would become. Nourishing your consciousness with premium knowledge isn't pastime recreation, it's a methodology for living. It's the essence of individual transformation. And if you dedicate yourself to it, even just brief periods each day, your consciousness will transform quietly, steadily, profoundly. And that transformation will influence everything in your existence. Chapter 9. Extend your perspective across decades. Among the most significant unlocks for constructing an exceptional mind, learning to extend your consciousness beyond the immediate moment. Most people contemplate in days, some contemplate in weeks, a small percentage contemplate in months, remarkably few contemplate in years. But the rarest, most formidable, most exceptional minds, they contemplate in decades. They don't fixate on immediate results. They don't panic when development requires extended time. They comprehend that authentic transformation demands years, genuine years, and they structure their existence with endurance, intention, and extended view methodology. When you extend your consciousness across decades, something internal transforms. Your anxiety diminishes. Your urgency becomes productive rather than frantic. Your choices become more intelligent, more grounded, more perceptive. You discontinue pursuing everything and commence selecting with intention. You discontinue measuring against someone else's timeline because you recognize you're constructing something durable, not something momentary. Extended view thinking liberates you. Liberation to transform naturally. Liberation to evolve without pressure. Liberation to remain consistent far beyond when inspiration evaporates. Why is short-term thinking so problematic? When you focus exclusively on immediate outcomes, you become reactive. You lose heart rapidly. You surrender prematurely. You bounce from concept to concept because nothing feels sufficiently immediate. You commence believing something is fundamentally wrong with you simply because outcomes aren't instantaneous. But nothing extraordinary manifests instantly. Mastery isn't instantaneous. Competence isn't instantaneous. Genuine confidence isn't instantaneous. A powerful self-image isn't instantaneous. These realities demand repetition, endurance, persistence. When you embrace extended view thinking, you ultimately grant yourself permission to transform how humans authentically transform, incrementally, progressively, systematically. Consider a developing forest. It doesn't achieve maturity in a single season. It requires years, quiet years, gradual years of establishing roots before expansion becomes observable. If you assessed that forest in its opening months, you'd conclude nothing was developing, but everything was developing, simply not where you could perceive it. Identically true for you. You're establishing internal foundations. You're cultivating internal resilience, internal awareness, internal strength, far before the external world perceives the transformation. Extended view thinking reminds you that invisible development is equally essential as observable achievement. When you extend your consciousness across decades, something profound occurs. Your standards increase. You no longer compromise for shortcuts because shortcuts don't persist across 10 years. You don't squander energy on passing distractions because distractions don't matter in a decade. You commence investing in behaviors, associations, competencies, and choices that your future self will genuinely appreciate.
Among the most substantial advantages of extended view thinking, emotional steadiness. When something fails, you don't collapse, you don't implode. You simply recognize this comprises one element of a substantially extended narrative. You perceive setbacks as momentary events within an extended story. You perceive mistakes as education, not ruin. You perceive difficult seasons as preparation, not punishment. Extended view thinking transforms emotional disturbance into emotional stability. This consciousness additionally reorganizes your discipline when you recognize you're constructing something for the subsequent 10 years. Every modest action becomes significant. A single physical practice, a single book section, a single hour of concentration. It no longer feels trivial. It transforms into one component within a substantially more extensive architecture. You commence appreciating consistency rather than intensity. You abandon rushing, you abandon forcing, you commence constructing with stability. Extended view thinking equally safeguards you from the danger of comparison. When you concentrate on your extended trajectory, you discontinue observing sideways. You discontinue contrasting your Chapter 3 with someone else's Chapter 20. You comprehend that everyone transforms at a distinct rate, and velocity isn't the objective. Direction is, trajectory is, advancement is. So how do you establish this extended view consciousness? You commence by questioning yourself through an extended lens. Who do I genuinely intend to become in a decade? What behaviors does my ultimate self depend on? What consciousness am I genuinely constructing? What competencies will continue mattering in 10 years? These questions shift your attention away from temporary discomfort and toward authentic transformation. Then you synchronize your daily selections with those extended responses. Modest actions repeated steadily, directed correctly. That's extended view thinking demonstrated. And the magnificence is, when you extend your consciousness, your immediate existence actually becomes simpler. You recognize what genuinely matters. You recognize what genuinely doesn't. Your choices become simpler because they're grounded in a substantially more expansive vision rather than temporary emotional states. You might not perceive the complete influence of this consciousness currently, but in 10 years, yes, 10 complete years, you'll look back and recognize that extended view thinking was among the most profound presents you granted yourself. Because while most people sprint and exhaust themselves, you'll be advancing steadily and arriving.
While most people pursue temporary achievements, you'll be constructing persistent strength. While most people surrender prematurely, you'll persist long enough to accomplish genuinely remarkable transformation. An exceptional consciousness isn't exclusively formidable, it's persevering. It contemplates beyond the immediate. It maintains the comprehensive perspective. It selects durability over swiftness. And the instant you genuinely master this, your complete existence transforms, not abruptly, but profoundly. Chapter 10. Master the art of delayed satisfaction and inner control. If you genuinely aspire to construct a consciousness that's genuinely powerful, you must cultivate the capacity to wait for what genuinely matters. You must cultivate the capacity of genuine self-control. At the foundation of every formidable consciousness exists this solitary capacity, the capacity to prioritize extended-term growth beyond immediate comfort, extended-term rewards beyond instantaneous satisfaction, extended-term achievement beyond temporary escape. Most individuals fail not because they're incapable, but because they cannot postpone satisfaction. They desire the reward currently. They desire the sensation currently. They desire the convenience currently. That currently mentality imprisons them perpetually. Genuine self-control isn't about depriving yourself of satisfaction, it's about granting yourself superior satisfaction. Satisfaction that persists, satisfaction that transforms you, satisfaction that propels you forward rather than stalling you. Imagine two versions of your consciousness, the version responding to every impulse, the version choosing deliberately. Which version would you genuinely depend on? Which version constructs the existence you genuinely desire? Which version can navigate pressure, opportunity, and responsibility? It's perpetually the deliberate version, the version that pauses, the version that contemplates, the version that chooses with genuine intention. Postponing satisfaction is a manifestation of consciousness strength that distinguishes the exceptional from the typical. Contemplate this genuinely. Every significant objective demands extended time. Constructing a profession demands time. Developing a powerful physiology demands time. Establishing an enterprise demands time. Developing genuine confidence demands time. Developing genuine mastery demands time. Yet the planet perpetually tempts you with shortcuts, distractions, and instantaneous convenience. And every instance you choose the shortcut, you diminish your consciousness. Every instance you choose the appropriate extended-term action, even when it's unexciting, even when it's uncomfortable, you fortify your consciousness. Let me simplify this in practical language. Self-control initiates with awareness. You must commence noticing your impulses. The impulse to examine your communications device, the impulse to postpone your objectives, the impulse to escape your sensations, the impulse to choose convenience, the impulse to circumvent the demanding thing. Most people perform these impulses automatically, but the instant you pause, even for mere seconds, you generate space. And in that space, you reclaim your authority. Those few seconds represent the distance between reactive existence and deliberate existence. Subsequently arrives the capacity to choose deliberately. When you experience the desire to respond impulsively, interrogate yourself. Will this matter in 60 minutes? Will this matter tomorrow? Will this matter in 12 months? These simple questions interrupt the emotional fascination of instantaneous satisfaction. They situate you back in your extended consciousness. When you commence making choices grounded in who you intend to transform into, not how you feel presently, you penetrate a completely different consciousness level. And let's highlight something essential. Self-control doesn't develop by completely preventing impulses indefinitely. It develops by encountering impulses and choosing the more powerful direction. Every instance you articulate, not currently, rather than why not, your discipline increases. Every instance you articulate, eventually, rather than immediately, your confidence increases. Every instance you demonstrate to yourself you can postpone, your extended term becomes stronger.
Here's why extended satisfaction generates such remarkable force. It produces emotional self-sufficiency. You no longer depend on your emotional state to perform. You no longer depend on immediate convenience to feel satisfactory. You no longer depend on instantaneous honors to maintain inspiration. You become the wellspring of your personal stability, and that stability becomes your competitive advantage. Because when others surrender, you maintain. When others fragment under pressure, you remain grounded. When others prioritize momentary satisfaction over advancement, you select intention. Self-control additionally constructs something else profoundly impactful: self-esteem. You experience stronger when you keep your word to yourself. You experience more capable when you prioritize extended term beyond immediate. You experience more grounded when you don't permit impulses to command your existence. Self-esteem is among the most exceptional presents you can grant yourself, and self-control is how you genuinely acquire it. Make this useful. Commence with modest acts of postponed satisfaction. Avoid the unnecessary digital engagement. Finish your objective prior to relaxing. Execute the more demanding action initially. Maintain your concentration slightly longer. Withstand the desire to surrender when conditions grow uncomfortable. These modest actions multiply. These modest actions establish consciousness. These modest actions construct mental muscle. And here's the authentic reality you must comprehend. Your extended term is constructed by the instances when you select what's appropriate rather than what's convenient. It's constructed by the instances when you maintain yourself steadfast while your sensations pull elsewhere. It's constructed by the instances when you postpone convenience in exchange for transformation. An exceptional consciousness doesn't prevent desire, it directs it. An exceptional consciousness doesn't eliminate sensation, it commands it. An exceptional consciousness doesn't pursue instantaneous satisfaction, it generates extended fulfillment. And the more thoroughly you cultivate self-control, the more completely it becomes automatic. Ultimately, you simply become the consciousness that makes formidable selections. You simply become the consciousness that can postpone. You simply become the consciousness that doesn't fragment under temptation. And that consciousness, that identity, represents what elevates you substantially beyond the typical. This represents the capacity for self-control. This represents the authority of extended satisfaction. And it will reorganize not exclusively your consciousness, but your complete existence. Chapter 11. Construct genuine confidence through demonstrated competence. Genuine confidence remains among the most misinterpreted capacities existing. Individuals imagine genuine confidence originates from bravado, from articulating boldly, from pretending fearlessness. But authentic confidence, the category that persists, the category sustaining you through pressure, through obstacles, through uncertainty, contains nothing to do with performing. Authentic confidence originates from demonstrated competence, from genuine skill, from authentic proof, from recognizing you can genuinely depend on yourself because you've genuinely earned that capacity. If you want confidence that genuinely withstands, you must construct it from the inside extending outward, not from the outside extending inward. You cannot depend on recognition, endorsement, or recognition, because identical individuals praising you presently might question you subsequently. Identical environments elevating you presently might demolish you subsequently. But competence? Competence remains perpetually yours. Nobody can eliminate what you've rehearsed, what you've perfected, what you've demonstrated persistently. Think about instances in your personal history when you genuinely experienced confident. Not enthusiastic, not optimistic, but genuinely confident. Those instances materialized for one cause. You genuinely understood you could navigate the scenario. That understanding wasn't psychological. It wasn't imaginative. It emerged from genuine experience. When you've executed something repeatedly, anxiety doesn't triumph. When you've trained extensively until mistakes disappear, uncertainty quiets significantly. Confidence isn't mysterious. Confidence is rehearsal.
That's precisely why competence represents the foundation. Want to feel formidable? Become capable. Want to feel powerful? Construct genuine ability. Want to genuinely depend on yourself? Grant yourself legitimate reasons to depend on yourself. Confidence grounded in emotion will fragment, but confidence grounded in genuine competence persists indefinitely. Now, genuine competence doesn't require worldwide excellence. It doesn't require perfection. It simply demands commitment. Commitment to developing progressively. Commitment to manifesting up. Commitment to advancing steadily even when individuals aren't observing. The individuals experiencing the greatest confidence frequently are individuals who educated themselves privately when nobody was observing. Let me deconstruct this into tangible phases. Genuine confidence evolves across 3 phases: education, rehearsal, application. Initially, you educate yourself. You comprehend the fundamentals. You comprehend the mechanics. You examine. You consume information. That represents essential groundwork, but it's insufficient. Numerous individuals stall here, believing education equals confidence. But genuine confidence doesn't materialize at the education phase. It materializes at the subsequent phase. That subsequent phase is rehearsal. Rehearsal means repetition. Rehearsal means mistakes. Rehearsal means trying, failing, adjusting, trying repeatedly. Rehearsal exists where you build the organic understanding, mindful and corporeal, forming the foundation of genuine confidence. And genuinely, it feels uncomfortable. Genuinely, it's slow. Genuinely, it demands persistence. But the more extensively you rehearse, the more authentically you build competence, and competence transforms into certainty. Subsequently arrives the ultimate phase, application. Application is the location where your genuine confidence transforms into observable. It's whenever you use what you've educated yourself, whenever you penetrate authentic scenarios, whenever you perform instead of overthinking. And every instance you use your competence, you validate your capacity. You reinforce your consciousness as someone genuinely capable of managing it. Application closes the circuit between effort and genuine self-confidence. Another essential element of building genuine confidence is embracing genuine feedback. Not all feedback feels pleasant, yet genuine feedback represents precious material. It illuminates where you require improvement. It illuminates where you require development. It strengthens your consciousness.
Genuinely confident individuals aren't frightened of criticism because their self-image doesn't depend on flawlessness. Their self-image depends on perpetually advancing. And that perspective constitutes element of what generates them genuinely strong. Here's something you might not have contemplated. Genuine confidence expands substantially more rapidly whenever you concentrate on one element at a time. Most individuals attempt excellence at everything simultaneously and accomplish excellence at nothing. Yet whenever you select one competence, one exercise, one region to advance, and you commit concentrated effort into it, you transform more rapidly. Swift transformation produces swift competence. Swift competence produces swift genuine confidence. Simplicity represents genuine power. You additionally construct genuine confidence by honoring commitments to yourself. Whenever you communicate you'll perform something and you genuinely perform it, you strengthen self-reliance. Whenever you communicate you'll educate yourself and you genuinely educate yourself, your consciousness starts genuinely trusting you. Whenever you remain consistent, even with modest commitments, you fortify your consciousness. And consciousness-grounded genuine confidence represents the most formidable classification of genuine confidence existing. Let's discuss comparison briefly. Comparison demolishes genuine confidence not necessarily because individuals surpass you, yet because comparison diverts you from your genuine development. Genuine confidence materializes from contrasting yourself with who you represented yesterday, not who individuals represent presently.
Whenever you're advancing, you're genuinely succeeding. Whenever you're educating yourself, you're genuinely succeeding. Whenever you're rehearsing, you're genuinely succeeding. Authentic competence expands quietly, and so does genuine confidence. And here's the ultimate reality you must completely understand. Genuinely confident individuals aren't genuinely confident because scenarios are uncomplicated. They're genuinely confident because they've constructed the capacity to navigate whatever materializes. Genuine confidence doesn't eliminate difficulty. Genuine confidence equips you to navigate difficulty. Genuine confidence doesn't eliminate fear. Competence permits you to progress despite the fear, because internally you recognize you've genuinely educated yourself. An exceptional consciousness doesn't depend on enthusiasm. It doesn't depend on fortunate circumstances. It doesn't depend on external recognition. It depends on authentic competence, earned proof. Authentic, genuine confidence develops, not yearned for. It expands one repetition at a time, one education session at a time, one courageous advance at a time. And the more thoroughly you construct it, the more genuinely unshakable you transform. Chapter 12. Master the quiet power of stillness, perception, and direction. There arrives a moment in your transformation when producing noise quits supporting you, when articulating stops supporting you, when reacting stops supporting you. Suddenly, you recognize something remarkably potent. The most formidable individuals occupying the chamber frequently talk the least. The most intellectually sophisticated minds frequently articulate the minimum. The individuals possessing the greatest advantage, the individuals who perpetually make the optimum selection at the optimum moment, frequently represent the individuals who perfected three quiet capacities: stillness, perception, and direction. These three capacities don't generate noise. They don't demand recognition. They don't pursue recognition. Yet they'll transform your consciousness into a location where selections materialize with genuine purpose, not impulsiveness. Let's commence with stillness. Stillness destabilizes numerous individuals because stillness compels you to encounter your consciousness. It compels you to encounter your dread. It compels you to encounter your longings. It compels you to encounter your authentic reality. Yet, the instant you become comfortable with stillness, it transforms into among your most exceptional origins of genuine power. Stillness generates psychological territory. Stillness generates territory to metabolize. Stillness generates territory to sever your authentic sensations from your psychological reactions. Whenever your consciousness perpetually maintains animation, individuals' perspectives, perpetual distractions, continuous stimulation, you'll perpetually remain obscured from your authentic voice. Whenever you practice stillness deliberately, even briefly daily, you brighten your consciousness. You transform more grounded. You transform more deliberate. You generate a consciousness precision that most individuals never experience because they perpetually remain too engaged to achieve it. Stillness isn't vacant. Stillness overflows with solutions. Now, let's examine perception. Perception represents the capacity to identify what individuals overlook, the capacity to listen when individuals accelerate to articulate, the capacity to examine behaviors, objectives, intentions, conditions. Perception isn't inactive. Perception represents dynamic consciousness, and consciousness represents an extraordinary capacity. Whenever you examine meticulously, you capture specifics individuals disregard. You comprehend individuals more thoroughly, not because they articulate who they represent, yet because you monitor how they perform. You comprehend scenarios more thoroughly, not because individuals elucidate them, yet because you identify the underlying mechanisms. You comprehend yourself more thoroughly, not because you analyze endlessly, yet because you monitor your consciousness, your reactions, your exercises. Individuals illuminate everything when you know how to maintain your focus. The way they articulate, the way they transfer themselves, the way they relate to individuals, the way they navigate pressure, the way they respond to obstacles. Most individuals overlook these indicators because they're excessively busy articulating or thinking about what they intend to articulate subsequently. But you're building a formidable consciousness, and a formidable consciousness knows how to monitor before performing. Perception additionally defends you. It enables you to recognize hazardous indicators prematurely. It enables you to comprehend timing, when to progress, when to postpone, when to articulate, when to remain quiet. Substantial success really is timing, and substantial timing genuinely originates from consciousness. Finally, let's introduce direction.
Direction represents what separates arbitrary action from significant action. Direction represents what transforms effort into advancement. Direction represents what transforms your selections into intellectually deliberate rather than psychological. A directional cerebral doesn't inquire, what do I genuinely experience performing? They inquire what represents the most intellectually optimal selection. They don't progress grounded in impulsiveness. They progress grounded on genuine intention. They don't perform merely to perform. They perform to generate genuine influence. Direction demands reflection. Direction demands considering extensively. Direction demands comprehending effects previously they materialize. And direction transforms into formidable whenever merged with stillness and perception. Stillness generates clarity. Perception generates comprehension. Direction generates purpose. Visualize yourself stepping into any scenario whatsoever, with these three capacities. You articulate minimally, so you maintain more. You examine thoroughly, so you understand more. You strategize quietly, so your selections transform deliberate rather than turbulent. You transform unpredictable, not because you're cryptic, yet because you're deliberate. And individuals cannot anticipate someone who doesn't pursue impulsiveness. Let me communicate something numerous individuals perpetually ignore. Stillness doesn't represent powerlessness. Perception doesn't represent inactivity. Direction doesn't represent deception. These represent manifestations of consciousness. These represent manifestations of command. These represent manifestations of psychological strength. You don't constantly require to demonstrate yourself. You don't constantly require to react. You don't constantly require to counter. Occasionally, the most formidable action represents the action you don't perform. Occasionally, the most intellectually optimal thing you can communicate constitutes silence. Occasionally, the greatest authority exists in postponing, monitoring, and comprehending. Whenever you perfect these three quiet capacities, your consciousness grows organically. You transform less responsive, much less pressed, much less overwhelmed. You contemplate earlier than you progress, which signifies you seldom regret your selections. You maintain your authority rather than distributing it via impulsive reactions. You transform someone who advances calmly, articulates deliberately, and selects intelligently. These capacities don't generate you observable, they transform you significant. They don't generate you loud, they transform you efficient. And progressively, you'll detect something remarkable. Individuals commence regarding your existence not because you command, yet because you transmit clarity. They depend on your selections, they identify your steadiness, they experience your consciousness, and they recognize you don't progress without genuine purpose. This represents what stillness, perception, and direction accomplish for you. They transform your consciousness into a quiet capability, a capability that advances with genuine intention, identifies with accuracy, and performs with accuracy. Chapter 13. Develop unbreakable resilience in the face of adversity. Existence will not perpetually function as you anticipate. You'll experience opposition, disappointment, unexpected obstacles, and challenging scenarios. That's guaranteed.
However, the genuine question, the question that fundamentally shapes your complete trajectory is this: do you fragment under opposition, or do you transform more powerful through it? Most individuals fracture. They shed assurance, they shed direction, they permit existence's weight to diminish them. Yet an exceptional consciousness performs something remarkably distinct. It transforms unbreakable. It becomes more powerful through opposition. It becomes more perceptive through opposition. It becomes more capable through difficulty. Unbreakability doesn't suggest unaffected. It doesn't suggest unmoved. It indicates you expand from the circumstances that genuinely ought to demolish you. You transform superior, not embittered. You transform progressively intelligent, not progressively harmed. You transform progressively capable, not progressively apprehensive. Opposition doesn't deteriorate you. Opposition transforms you. Here's the truth most individuals overlook. You don't transform throughout the uncomplicated circumstances. You appreciate the uncomplicated circumstances, yet you transform throughout the demanding circumstances. Genuine strength constructs whenever scenarios feel serious. Genuine assurance constructs whenever scenarios feel uncertain. Genuine understanding constructs whenever scenarios feel perplexing. Genuine resilience constructs whenever scenarios feel agonizing. The scenarios that challenge you most intensely represent the scenarios possessing the maximum capacity to grow you, yet exclusively whenever you select to advance with strength rather than surrender. To construct an unbreakable consciousness, you must initially transform how you understand difficulty. Instead of articulating, "Why is this occurring to me?" interrogate, "What is this preparing me for?" That singular transformation changes everything. Suddenly, the obstacle becomes preparation. The obstacle transforms into education. The opposition transforms into honing. Whenever you perceive existence this way, you quit experiencing cursed and commence experiencing capable. You quit experiencing unfortunate and commence experiencing capable. Another essential element to turning unbreakable: embrace modest, deliberate difficulty. Whenever you circumvent all discomfort, modest circumstances feel substantial, modest obstacles feel paralyzing, and existence feels hazardous. Yet whenever you deliberately encounter manageable difficulty, whether it's awakening earlier, strengthening your discipline, exerting something frightening, or advancing beyond your secure territory, you construct consciousness capacity. You educate your consciousness to navigate pressure without fracturing. And similarly to genuine physical preparation, the increased opposition you encounter, the progressively more formidable you transform. Contemplate opposition like weight. You don't elevate the substantial weight initially. You commence modest. You progress gradually. Every repetition strengthens you. Existence functions similarly. Every obstacle you encounter is transforming your capability. Every difficulty is adding something to you. Every obstacle is extending what your consciousness can handle. An unbreakable consciousness additionally understands how to remain peaceful during pressure, not because you ignore your sensations, yet because you comprehend them. Whenever something difficult transpires, most individuals react instantaneously.
They intensify, they ruminate, they presume the maximum negative outcome. Yet an unbreakable consciousness pauses, it respires, it monitors, it grants itself a moment to retrieve clarity. That interval, those few seconds of steadiness, can transform the complete consequence. You don't require to eliminate opposition. You require to understand how to transform into positioned inside it. Another facet of unbreakability: flexibility. Existence won't perpetually adhere to your schedules. Individuals won't perpetually behave consistently. Possibilities won't perpetually appear as you pictured. Yet an unbreakable consciousness doesn't fragment whenever schedules shift. It modifies, it accommodates, it remains supple. Inflexibility fragments, flexibility persists. Whenever you master the capacity to accommodate swiftly, to change, to reorganize approach, you'll perpetually advance. You'll navigate existence with a consciousness dimension most individuals perpetually fail to create because they never persist adequate to accomplish it. Let's discuss obstacles. Whenever something fails, most individuals perceive it as conclusion, yet an unbreakable consciousness perceives it as comprehension, information, reaction. You comprehend what doesn't operate. You comprehend wherever you require to evolve. You comprehend what requires adjustment. Collapse discontinues being termination and transforms into detour, one ultimately conducting you to a progressively robust version of yourself. Every instance you elevate following collapse, you strengthen unbreakability. You're educating your consciousness. We accommodate, we persist, we don't fragment. Here's something essential to recognize. Unbreakability exists a selection, a daily selection, a selection to expand rather than diminish, a selection to comprehend rather than protest, a selection to advance rather than remain trapped. Every obstacle entering your existence presents two routes, fragment or construct. You determine which direction you follow. An exceptional consciousness isn't constructed throughout convenience, it's constructed throughout difficulty, formed throughout opposition, enhanced through difficulty. And the progressively substantially you embrace that reality, the progressively unshakable you transform. Chapter 14. Reprogram your inner voice for authority and strength. The phrases you articulate to yourself construct your existence more substantially than any phrase communicated by anybody else. You inhabit your consciousness perpetually, every second of every moment, and whenever that consciousness overflows with doubtful, negative, or self-defeating communication, it matters zero how capable you are, you'll maintain yourself underneath your capacity. Yet, whenever you understand how to reprogram your consciousness, whenever you understand how to articulate to yourself with authority and strength, everything transforms. Assurance increases, clarity increases, performing transforms more manageable. Your consciousness starts reorganizing into someone progressively potent. Most individuals imagine consciousness communication represents mere history, something that perpetually merely transpires. Yet, consciousness communication represents regimen. It's constructing your perspectives. It's constructing your self-perception. It's constructing your capacity to move forward. Every statement you duplicate transforms into a script your consciousness adheres to. So whenever your script articulates, "I'm incapable," you'll perform underneath your capacity. Whenever your script articulates, "I perpetually collapse," you'll hesitate. Whenever your script articulates, "I'm not that kind of individual," you'll perpetually withhold yourself from expansion. Yet the wonderful reality, you're capable of revising the script. You're capable of adjusting the consciousness voice steering you. You're capable of reprogram your consciousness with genuine intention rather than permitting aged customs to perform mechanically. Let's commence with consciousness. Pay focus on how you articulate to yourself, particularly whenever you're pressured, uncertain, or apprehensive. Do you motivate yourself or devastate yourself? Do you grant yourself guidance or amplify your uncertainties? Most individuals are severe with themselves when they require assistance most. They communicate to themselves in approaches they perpetually communicate to a companion. Yet recognize this: the consciousness hears, the consciousness receives, the consciousness duplicates what it hears, and it'll rely on your articulation more than anybody else's. The next action: delete the outdated scripts. These represent the automatic concepts you've duplicated for years. Concepts like, "I cannot manage this," "That's simply who I represent," or "I'm perpetually exhausted," "I'm perpetually pressured." These expressions feel comfortable, yet comfortable doesn't mean accurate. Comfortable doesn't mean beneficial. Comfortable merely indicates duplicated. And duplication represents what granted consciousness communication influence. So whenever you identify yourself deploying these aged scripts, pause, interrupt them, change them. Substitution represents among the most efficient manifestations of consciousness reprogramming.
not vacant optimism, not pretending everything functions ideally, yet genuinely empowering terminology. Rather than "I'm incapable of managing this," attempt "I'm capable of advancing through this." Rather than "I perpetually collapse," attempt "I'm progressively advancing." Rather than "I'm not equipped," attempt "I'm extending into this position." These don't represent fabrications, they're selections. They're bearings for your consciousness. They navigate your consciousness towards strength progressively. Another influential component of consciousness reprogramming, articulating to yourself like a true guide. Guides articulate with clarity. Guides articulate with genuine intention. Guides articulate with authority. Guides don't articulate, "Maybe I'll try." They articulate, "Here's what we're performing." Whenever you adopt that approach with yourself, you move from uncertainty to authority. You discontinue negotiating with yourself. You discontinue hesitating. You commence directing your consciousness identically to how a genuine guide would guide you. Terminology matters. Approach matters. Consciousness matters. Rather than informing yourself, "I hope I can maintain discipline," articulate to yourself, "I represent someone profoundly disciplined." The instant you adjust the consciousness in your terminology, your selections commence aligning with it. Your consciousness communication transforms the blueprint your consciousness adheres to. And consciousness-grounded communication substantially transcends result-grounded communication. Another crucial component, how you articulate to yourself throughout collapse. This location is the place most individuals turn their personal adversary.
Whenever they collapse, they assault themselves. They exaggerate the mistake. They transform a momentary instant into a narrative of unworthiness. Yet formidable consciousnesses perform something completely distinct. Whenever they collapse, they mentor themselves. They analyze, they modify, they progress forward. They articulate, "Here's what I comprehend," or "Here's how I'll advance subsequently." They don't humiliate themselves, they strengthen themselves. And because of that, mistakes transform into advancing stones rather than self-created injuries. Consciousness communication reprogramming additionally demands steadiness. Articulating a powerful expression one instant won't reconstruct anything, yet duplicating it day after day, duplicating it throughout opposition, duplicating it throughout apprehension, that transforms your consciousness. Your consciousness actually reconstructs itself via duplication. The progressively steadily you articulate to yourself with clarity and strength, the progressively your consciousness transforms. That's precisely why affirmations operate for certain individuals and not for individuals. It's not the expressions, it's the duplication, the genuine conviction, and the sensation supporting the expressions. And here's the ultimate element. Your consciousness communication must correspond to your genuine tomorrow, not your completed yesterday. The consciousness that delivered you to this location cannot transport you everywhere you intend to progress. You must articulate like the individual you're becoming. You must articulate like someone capable, disciplined, peaceful, concentrated, and formidable. Whenever your consciousness communication synchronizes with your greatest self, your customized selections, your actions, and your performances naturally pursue. Your consciousness voice doesn't represent simple dialogue. It represents direction. It represents guidance. It represents regulation. And whenever you reprogram it with genuine intention, whenever you adjust it from self-undermining to self-directed, you construct a consciousness that advocates for you rather than deteriorating you. You construct a consciousness condition wherever strength advances organically. And you transform someone who contemplates, articulates, and performs from a location of genuine authority. Chapter 15. Embody your highest self and live your intended identity. There materializes a moment in every genuine transformation whenever you must discontinue preparing to transform into the individual you intend to transform into and genuinely transform into them. Not perform, not envision, genuinely transform, genuinely possess them, genuinely exist as them. Because consciousness represents the ultimate threshold. Everything you've been comprehending, constructing, and rehearsing throughout this expedition directs to one element, you. A progressively formidable you, a progressively courageous you, a progressively disciplined, progressively concentrated, progressively formidable version of yourself. Yet you cannot accomplish that version by remaining connected to who you represented previously. You must genuinely transform into the consciousness of the individual you intend to transform into. Most individuals perpetually remain here. They adjust their exercises, yet not their consciousness. They adjust their objectives, yet not the approach they experience themselves. And because of that, they continue imprisoned in aged customs. You're incapable of construct your genuine existence with an aged consciousness. Whenever you perpetually experience yourself as unpredictable, you'll perpetually perform unpredictably. Whenever you perpetually experience yourself as typical, you'll perpetually create typical selections. Whenever you perpetually experience yourself as someone who encounters obstacles, you'll unconsciously recreate obstacles. Your consciousness represents the blueprint that your consciousness adheres to. Adjust the blueprint and you adjust the complete composition of your existence. So how do you transform into your genuine consciousness? You commence by specifying it explicitly. Who do you genuinely intend to transform into? Not in vague motivational statements. Specify with genuine clarity. What practices does your greatest self maintain? How do they transport themselves? How do they think? How do they decide? How do they articulate to themselves? How do they approach challenges? Whenever you can picture this individual precisely, you grant your consciousness a location, a bearing to progress toward. Subsequently materializes the greatest component. Perform like that individual currently, not eventually, currently. Even whenever you don't completely feel like them yet. Consciousness grows via action, assurance grows via duplication, conviction grows via genuine experience. Whenever you perform like the individual you intend to transform into, your consciousness starts modifying. Your consciousness starts accommodating. You commence recognizing yourself with the individual you're embodying, and progressively those performances transform into practices. Those practices transform into characteristics. Those characteristics transform into consciousness. And one instant you awaken and recognize you transformed into the individual you were embodying. Yet recognize this, embodying your greatest consciousness demands relinquishing your aged consciousness, and that can feel difficult. Your aged practices will tug at you. Your aged concepts will interrogate you. Your aged insecurities will strive to maintain you somewhere you've constantly inhabited. Not because you're incapable, because the consciousness chooses familiarity over transformation. You must volunteer to transcend your aged self. You must volunteer to defraud your aged customs. You must volunteer to discontinue the loyalty you've constructed to your earlier consciousness. Consciousness additionally demands steadiness. You're incapable of transform into a genuine version of yourself for one instant and anticipate irreversible transformation. You must experience this consciousness daily. You must practice it till it becomes normal. Consider consciousness like clothing. You put it on until it fits you perfectly, until it feels like second anatomy. The progressively substantially you feel like your genuine self, the progressively your genuine self dissolves. Let's examine something numerous individuals perpetually overlook. Your environment plays a substantial function in consciousness. If your environment perpetually represents who you represented previously, it'll become progressively difficult to transform into who you intend to transform into. You might require to reorganize your environment. You might require to devote duration with individuals displaying your genuine tomorrow, not your completed yesterday. You might require to cleanse your area, improve your practices, and remove yourself from impacts reinforcing the consciousness you're departing. You're incapable of progress into your genuine version whenever you're perpetually positioned in the darkness of your earlier one. Another formidable component of consciousness construction: terminology. The phrases you utilize to depict yourself matter. Whenever you continuously articulate, "I'm lethargic, I'm undisciplined, I'm perpetually pressured, I'm incompetent at this," then your consciousness will rely on you. Yet whenever you commence articulating from your genuine consciousness, "I'm disciplined, I'm advancing, I manage obstacles effectively, I'm turning progressively formidable daily," you compose the internal script your consciousness adheres to. Articulate like the individual you're transforming into, not the individual you're departing. And here's something essential. Your genuine consciousness doesn't require recognition. You don't require individuals to acknowledge it. You don't require recognition. You don't require authorization. Most individuals will perpetually decline comprehending your transformation till substantially afterward. And that represents satisfactory. Consciousness represents an interior reorganization. Previously, it perpetually turns a observable one. Don't postpone for recognition. Genuinely rely on yourself initially. Transforming into your genuine consciousness represents an exhibition of bravery. It's an exhibition of ownership. It's a statement that your genuine tomorrow matters progressively than your comfort with familiarity. And the instant you complete this movement, the instant you commence existing as the individual you're destined to transform into, you'll recognize something remarkable. Existence begins coordinating with you. Possibilities coordinate, exercises coordinate, individuals coordinate, your consciousness coordinates, because consciousness perpetually transmits outward. It structures everything. This closing chapter doesn't represent conclusion, it represents commencement. The commencement of your genuine version, the commencement of your greatest capacity, the commencement of the existence you're currently equipped to construct. Conclusion: your transformation continues from this moment forward. You've completed this audiobook, yet this is genuinely wherever your genuine advancement begins. The advancement of experiencing every reality you've comprehended, every discipline you've fortified, every consciousness you've reconstructed. An exceptional consciousness isn't constructed in momentary instances. It's constructed daily, via selections, via consciousness, via intention. And currently, you're equipped with everything you require to progress into a progressively formidable, progressively intelligent, progressively powerful version of yourself. You've comprehended how to reconstruct your consciousness base, how to educate your consciousness with intention, how to remove consciousness noise, how to strengthen your sensation authority, how to think autonomously, how to nurture discipline, how to nourish your consciousness exceptional information, how to extend your perspective, how to perfect self-management, how to construct authentic assurance, how to leverage silence and approach, how to construct unbreakable resilience, how to reprogram your consciousness dialogue, and ultimately, how to transform into the individual you genuinely intend to transform into. These don't represent mere concepts. These represent implements. These represent consciousness implements. These represent foundations differentiating a reactive existence from a genuine existence. And as you proceed forward, you'll experience instances whenever it's progressively uncomplicated to regress into aged customs. That's typical. That's genuine human nature. Yet every instant you select the progressively formidable direction, even in modest approaches, you strengthen the consciousness you're constructing. A formidable consciousness doesn't transform via flawlessness, it transforms via steadiness.
Recognize this. You're not turning into a genuine individual accidentally. You're turning into a genuine individual via genuine selection. You're not hopeful for transformation, you're generating it. You're not postponing for strength, you're educating it. And this expedition doesn't terminate when the audiobook concludes. It perpetuates every instantaneous you awaken with discipline, every instant you pause to contemplate prior to responding, every instant you quiet interruptions, every instant you select development beyond comfort, every instant you select intention beyond comfort. A formidable consciousness doesn't transform due to a momentary burst, it transforms via persistent selections accumulated into something remarkable. And with every advance you transport, you demonstrate to yourself that you're capable of substantially progressively than you comprehended. So as you progress, maintain this reality with you. The planet might interrogate you initially, yet whenever your selections turn reliable, whenever your consciousness turns acute, whenever your consciousness turns rooted, uncertainty dissolves. It discontinues since exceptional individuals don't require to persuade anybody. Their existence articulates for them. Their advancement articulates for them. Their outcomes articulate for them. Your expedition toward turning exceptional has perpetually commenced, and presently the genuine element of your existence remains yours to construct deliberately, courageously, formidably.